The night sky over Kandahar province was absolute black when Staff Sergeant Hayden Wolf stepped out of the C-130 at 22,000 feet. No moon, no stars visible through the cloud cover, just darkness and the howling wind that tried to rip her from the sky the moment she cleared the aircraft. She fell through that darkness like a stone dropped into an infinite well. 29 years old, 5'7", 140 pounds of muscle, determination, and skills most soldiers would never possess. Dark brown hair pulled tight under her tactical helmet, hazel eyes that could spot movement at distances that seemed impossible. A custom-built rifle strapped to her chest that cost more than most people's cars. Hayden Wolf was about to disappear into the mountains of Afghanistan for 72 hours. Alone. No backup. No extraction plan if things went wrong. Just her skills, her equipment, and a mission that most special operations planners considered borderline suicidal. The altimeter on her wrist glowed green in the darkness. 18,000 feet. 15,000. 12,000. The oxygen mask covered her face, but even through it she could feel the brutal cold of the high-altitude air cutting through her gear. Her body was a dark speck falling through an empty sky over enemy territory, invisible to anyone who might be looking up from the mountains below. At 8,000 feet, she pulled the ripcord. The parachute deployed with a violent jerk that would have broken the ribs of someone who wasn't prepared for it. Hayden rode the opening shock like she'd done it 100 times before, because she had. The black canopy blossomed above her, nearly invisible against the night sky. She grabbed the steering toggles and began guiding herself toward a landing zone she'd only seen in satellite photographs. The mountains of Kandahar province rose up beneath her like the teeth of some massive predator. Jagged peaks, steep valleys, terrain so harsh that even the Taliban fighters who called this region home avoided certain areas because the land itself was more dangerous than any enemy. Hayden was heading directly into one of those areas. Her landing zone was a narrow shelf of rock at 8,200 feet elevation, barely large enough for a single person to set down without sliding off into a 100-foot drop. She'd chosen it specifically because it was the last place anyone would expect an American soldier to insert, which meant it was exactly where she needed to be. The ground rushed up. Hayden flared the parachute at the last possible second, killing her forward speed and dropping onto the rocky shelf with practiced precision. Her boots hit stone. She absorbed the impact with her knees, rolled once, and came up already moving. 10 seconds to collapse the parachute, 20 seconds to stuff it into her pack, along with the oxygen mask and high-altitude gear she no longer needed. 30 seconds to unsling her rifle and scan her surroundings through the night vision scope. Nothing moved in the green-tinted world visible through the optic. Just rocks and shadows and the kind of silence that only exists in places where humans rarely venture. Hayden allowed herself exactly 5 seconds to catch her breath. Then she started moving. The mission briefing had been short and direct. Intelligence had identified a series of Taliban commander meetings scheduled over the next week in various compounds throughout Kandahar province. High-value targets, men responsible for attacks that had killed American soldiers and Afghan civilians. Men who needed to be found, tracked, and eliminated. A SEAL team was being inserted to conduct direct action raids on these compounds. They would hit hard and fast, using overwhelming firepower and superior tactics to neutralize the targets before the enemy could respond. But SEAL teams, for all their skills and training, had limitations. They couldn't be everywhere at once. They couldn't watch enemy movements from positions that would take hours to reach on foot. They couldn't provide precision fire support at ranges that exceeded the effective distance of their weapons. That's where Hayden came in. Her mission was simple in concept, brutally difficult in execution. Insert alone via high-altitude parachute drop. Establish observation positions in the mountains above the target areas. Track enemy movements. Report intelligence. And if the situation required it, provide precision, long-range fire support that could eliminate threats before they ever knew they were being hunted. She would be a ghost in these mountains, invisible, independent, operating completely alone in terrain where a single mistake could mean death from a fall, from exposure, from enemy action, or from any of a dozen other hazards that came with solo operations in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Most soldiers would have been terrified at the prospect. Hayden Wolf felt completely at home. She'd grown up in the military foster system after her parents died in a car accident when she was 7, passed from one base to another, one temporary home to another, never staying anywhere long enough to form real attachments, never having anything that was truly hers, except the determination to prove she was worth something. The families who took her in did it for the extra money. She learned early that she was a transaction, not a daughter. Learned to be quiet, learned to be invisible, learned that the only person she could truly rely on was herself. At 19, she'd enlisted in the Army. At 21, she'd volunteered for sniper school. At 23, she'd completed the advanced, long-range precision fire course with the highest scores in the program's history. And at 25, she'd met Colonel Samuel Briggs. Briggs had been a legend, 62 years old when Hayden first trained under him. A sniper who'd operated in conflicts most people had forgotten about, making shots that seemed impossible with equipment that was primitive by modern standards. He'd taken one look at Hayden's scores, watched her shoot for exactly 15 minutes, and said 4 words that changed her life. "You have the gift." For 3 years, Briggs had trained her personally, taught her things that weren't in any manual or course curriculum. How to read terrain at distances measured in miles. How to calculate wind speed by watching vegetation through a rifle scope. How to control breathing and heartbeat until her body became perfectly still. How to exist alone in hostile territory for days or weeks at a time, moving like smoke through areas where other soldiers wouldn't survive a single night. He pushed her harder than any other student, made her repeat drills hundreds of times until they were flawless, made her calculate ballistics manually before she could use a computer, made her spend weeks in the field with minimal equipment, learning to survive on nothing. But everything he taught her was designed to keep her alive and make her better. Briggs was the first person who ever saw potential in her instead of just a problem to be managed. The first person who invested time in developing her skills rather than just warehousing her until she aged out of the system. He became the father she'd never had, the mentor she'd desperately needed. Briggs had died 3 years ago. Heart attack. Gone in seconds, probably never knew what hit him. Hayden still carried the custom scope he'd given her, mounted on her rifle as a constant reminder of the man who'd seen something in her that nobody else had bothered to look for. Now she was alone in the mountains of Afghanistan, doing exactly what he'd trained her to do. The first 24 hours were all about establishing her primary observation position. Hayden moved through the darkness like water flowing downhill, finding the path of least resistance, never silhouetting herself against the sky, always thinking 3 moves ahead. She covered 6 kilometers in 4 hours, climbing steadily higher into terrain that most people would have needed technical equipment to navigate. By dawn, she was at 9,100 feet, tucked into a hide site she'd constructed among a cluster of boulders that gave her clear observation of the valley below, while keeping her completely invisible to anyone who wasn't standing within 10 feet of her position. She ate a cold ration bar and drank water she'd purified from a mountain stream. Then she settled in behind her rifle and began the real work of surveillance. Through the scope, the valley was a world unto itself. Compounds scattered across the landscape, dirt roads connecting them like veins in a body, vehicles moving between locations, people going about their daily business, completely unaware that an American sniper was watching every movement from a position high above them. Hayden noted everything: the patterns of vehicle movement, which compounds saw the most traffic, where guards were posted, and when they changed shifts. She transmitted compressed data bursts via encrypted radio back to the operations center, feeding intelligence to analysts who would build target packages for the SEAL team's upcoming raids. She was good at this work, patient, detail-oriented, capable of lying motionless for hours while watching the same piece of terrain, waiting for that one critical piece of information that would make the difference between mission success and failure. The sun crossed the sky. The valley below shifted from morning shadow to midday glare to evening shadow again. Hayden barely moved except to shift positions slightly every few hours to prevent muscle cramping. She was a statue carved from stone, a part of the mountain itself. The isolation didn't bother her. In some ways, this was the most comfortable she'd ever been. No one expecting her to make small talk. No one judging her social skills or finding her too quiet, too withdrawn, too different. Just her and the mission in the mountains. Simple, clean, purposeful. As darkness fell on her first full day in the mountains, Hayden's radio crackled with an encrypted transmission from Colonel Margaret Vaughn, the task force commander who'd authorized this mission. Ghost 1, Granite Base, situation update. Intelligence indicates possible high-value target in your sector. Call sign Romeo. You are authorized for terminal action if positive identification is achieved. Hayden's finger keyed the radio. Her voice was quiet, controlled, giving away nothing of the spike of adrenaline that went through her at the mention of that call sign. Granite Base, Ghost 1. Romeo is confirmed? There was a pause. When Vaughn's voice came back, there was something different in her tone. Careful, like she was choosing her words precisely. Ghost 1, Romeo is the reason you're there. Lucas Kane's killer. We call him the Reaper. Former Spetsnaz, now working with Taliban. 60-plus confirmed kills of coalition forces. Intelligence suggests he's in your area of operations. He's hunting American snipers, which means he's hunting you. The world seemed to narrow down to a single point. Lucas Kane, her spotter, her partner, the closest thing to a brother she'd ever had, dead 18 months ago, killed by a single shot to the head at 1,850 meters while they were conducting surveillance on a Taliban stronghold. Lucas had been 26 years old. Funny, optimistic in ways that Hayden could never quite manage. He talked about his kid sister back home, how proud he was that she was going to college, how he was going to get out after his enlistment, maybe become a teacher himself. He had plans, a future, people who loved him. And then he was gone. 1 second calling wind corrections for Hayden, joking about whether his sister would like the girl Hayden was dating. The next second, dead. A bullet through his skull from a shooter Hayden never saw, from a position she never identified. She'd failed him, failed to protect her spotter, failed to even return fire against his killer. The shooter had never been identified, until now. Hayden's voice was steady when she responded, but anyone who knew her well would have heard the edge underneath the professional calm. Understood, Granite Base. If Romeo appears, I will engage. Negative, Ghost 1. If Romeo appears, you will report and evade. He's specifically hunting American snipers. He knows our tactics. He's as skilled as you are, maybe more experienced. Do not engage unless you have overwhelming tactical advantage. Acknowledge. Hayden stared out at the darkening valley. Somewhere out there was the man who'd killed Lucas, the man who'd put a bullet through her partner's skull from nearly a mile away and then disappeared like smoke. Ghost 1 acknowledges, she said. Then she added, quieter, but if I get the shot, ma'am, I'm taking it. The radio was silent for a long moment. Then Vaughn's voice came back, resigned. I know you will. Just make sure it's the right shot. Granite Base out. Hayden settled back into her hide, but sleep was impossible now. She stared out at the darkness, mind racing. The Reaper, Lucas's killer, here, in her area of operations. She pulled Lucas's dog tags from her pocket, running her thumb over the embossed letters. She'd carried them every day since his death. A reminder, a promise, a debt she intended to pay. I'll find him, she whispered to the darkness. I promise. The second day brought clouds rolling in from the north. turning the mountains into a landscape of shifting fog and limited visibility. Hayden adjusted her position, moving to a secondary hide site that gave her a different angle on the valley. The weather was both curse and blessing. It reduced her observation capability, but it also made her nearly impossible to spot. She'd been in position for maybe 3 hours when her radio crackled again. Different voice this time, male, tense. The kind of tension that came from people actively being shot at. Any station, this is Griffin 6. We are in contact, taking accurate fire from elevated positions, approximately 2,000 meters north of our location. We cannot identify shooter positions. Repeat, enemy fire from beyond our effective range. Request immediate counter-sniper support. Hayden recognized the call sign. Griffin 6 was the SEAL team that was supposed to conduct the raids she'd been providing intelligence for. They weren't supposed to be in the field yet. The first operation wasn't scheduled for another 18 hours. Something had gone wrong. She keyed her radio. Griffin 6, Ghost 1, what's your position? The response was immediate, almost desperate. Ghost 1, we're taking fire from the North Ridgeline. At least 3 shooters, maybe more. Range is beyond our capability. One of my men took a round through his plate carrier. We need help, now. Hayden was already moving, breaking down her position with practiced speed. Her mind was calculating distances, angles, approach routes. The North Ridgeline was approximately 2 kilometers from her current position. If she moved fast, stayed low, used the fog for concealment, she could reach an elevated position that would give her line of sight on the enemy shooters. Griffin 6, Ghost 1 is moving to your location. ETA 15 minutes. Stay in hard cover. Do not return fire. Let them think you're pinned and helpless. I'll handle the rest. She moved through the fog like her call sign suggested, a ghost drifting between the rocks and shadows. Her rifle felt like an extension of her body. 42 pounds of equipment on her back barely registered. She'd done movements like this 1,000 times in training, 100 times in actual operations. She knew exactly how fast she could move without making noise, exactly how to place her feet to avoid kicking loose stones that might give away her position. The fog was thick enough that visibility dropped to less than 50 meters at times. Hayden used that to her advantage, moving during the dense patches, freezing during the clearings. Always aware that the Reaper might be out here somewhere, always scanning for threats. 14 minutes after leaving her hide site, Hayden was settling into a firing position on an outcropping of rock that gave her clear observation of the North Ridgeline where the SEAL team was taking fire. And that's when she saw them. 12 men in full combat gear pressed against whatever cover they could find while rounds impacted around their position. Professional soldiers, well-trained, well-equipped, but utterly helpless against an enemy they couldn't see and couldn't reach. Hayden ranged the SEAL position with her laser rangefinder. 1,047 meters, close enough that she could see individual faces through her scope if she wanted to. But she wasn't looking at the SEALs. She was scanning the ridgeline to the north, searching for the enemy shooters who were raining death down on the American team from a position they probably thought was completely safe. The fog was thick, rolling in and out with the wind. Visibility dropped to less than 500 meters, then cleared to over a mile, then dropped again. It was like trying to see through curtains that kept opening and closing at random intervals. Hayden controlled her breathing, slowed her heart rate, became perfectly still behind her rifle, and waited. Patience was the sniper's greatest weapon. The ability to lie motionless for minutes or hours, waiting for that one perfect moment when everything aligned. Target visible. Wind conditions known. No obstructions between shooter and target. That fraction of a second when the impossible shot became merely difficult. 3 minutes passed. The fog cleared for maybe 15 seconds, and Hayden saw him. Enemy fighter on the North Ridgeline, partially concealed behind rocks at what her rangefinder told her was 2047 meters. He was settling in behind a rifle, clearly preparing to take another shot at the pinned SEAL team. Over a mile away, at an elevation almost 1,000 feet above the target, with shifting wind conditions and fog that could close in at any second and make the shot impossible. Most snipers wouldn't even attempt it. Hayden pulled out her handheld weather station and checked conditions with movements so practiced they were almost automatic. Wind 12 miles per hour from the northwest. Temperature 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Elevation 8,300 feet. Humidity 78%. She input the data into the ballistic calculator mounted on her rifle. The numbers came back instantly. 41.8 minutes of angle elevation adjustment. 7.6 minutes of angle windage correction. At this distance, her bullet would be in flight for approximately 3.1 seconds. 3.1 seconds where the wind could shift, where the target could move, where the fog could roll back in and make observation of impact impossible. Hayden made her scope adjustments with fingers that were steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. She settled into perfect shooting position, the rifle butt locked into her shoulder, her cheek welded to the stock, her body forming a stable platform that wouldn't waver even a fraction of an inch during the shot sequence. Through the scope at maximum magnification, the enemy fighter was a small shape, barely recognizable as human, at over 1.2 miles distance. Just a dark figure against lighter rock, completely unaware that death was watching him from a mountain almost 7,000 feet away. Hayden's finger took up the slack in her trigger. She held the crosshairs on target with the calculated holdover for bullet drop and wind drift. Her aim point was actually several feet above and to the right of where she wanted the bullet to impact, compensating for the laws of physics that governed long-range shooting. She found that perfect moment between heartbeats, that instant of absolute stillness when her body was completely motionless. The natural respiratory pause that every trained sniper learned to recognize and exploit. The rifle fired. The recoil was substantial, but Hayden wrote it perfectly, keeping her eye in the scope to observe the impact. 3.1 seconds of bullet flight. She watched through the scope, tracking where the shot had gone, looking for impact. The enemy fighter collapsed. No dramatic movie death, no spinning or flailing. He just dropped like someone had cut his strings. There 1 second and gone the next, disappearing behind the rocks that had been concealing him. Hayden worked the bolt smoothly, chambering a fresh round. Her voice was calm when she keyed the radio. Griffin 6, Ghost 1, target down at 2047 meters. There was silence on the radio for maybe 5 seconds. Then a voice came back, stunned. Ghost 1, Griffin 6 actual. Confirm your last. Did you say 2047 meters? Affirmative. Enemy sniper eliminated. North Ridgeline. You said at least 3 shooters. I'm scanning for the others. Through her scope, she could see the SEAL team members who'd been watching through their own optics, staring at the ridgeline where the enemy fighter had just dropped. Even at this distance, she could read the disbelief in their body language. They just watched someone make a shot most of them considered impossible. Hayden continued observing the North Ridgeline. The fog was rolling back in, reducing visibility, but she'd learned to read terrain during her 3 days in these mountains. She knew where the good shooting positions were, knew where an enemy sniper would set up to have effective fields of fire while remaining concealed from the valley below. 4 minutes later, another brief clearing in the fog revealed a second enemy fighter. This one positioned further west along the ridgeline at what her rangefinder measured as 2,120 meters. Hayden ran her calculations again, adjusted for the slightly greater distance and the different wind angle at that position, and fired. 3.2 seconds of bullet flight. The second enemy fighter dropped. 2 down, Hayden reported calmly, continuing scan. The radio crackled. A different voice this time, younger, with an edge of awe that the speaker wasn't quite managing to hide. Ghost 1, this is Griffin 2. Those were the 2 best shots I've ever seen. You're making 2,000+ meter kills look routine. Hayden's response was matter-of-fact, almost dismissive of what she'd just accomplished. At these distances, it's about precision measurement and execution. Every variable accounted for. Every calculation verified. The distance is just another problem to solve. She continued scanning the ridgeline, searching for the third shooter that the SEAL team had reported. But the fog was thickening now, visibility dropping to less than 300 meters. If there was a third enemy fighter up there, he was either well concealed or had withdrawn after watching his teammates drop from invisible fire. Hayden gave it another 10 minutes, but saw no movement, no additional targets. Finally, she keyed her radio. Griffin 6, Ghost 1. I count 2 enemy KIA. If there's a third shooter, he's either gone or so well hidden I can't find him. Recommend you displace from current position and continue your mission. The SEAL team leader's voice came back, and this time there was something different in his tone. Not just relief that the immediate threat was neutralized, but respect. The kind of respect that came from professionals recognizing exceptional skill. Ghost 1, Griffin 6. Understood. We're moving now. But I need to know, who the hell are you and how did you get here? Hayden was already breaking down her position, preparing to displace to a new location. Standard sniper protocol. Never stay in the same spot after taking shots. Move immediately. Assume the enemy knows where you are and is already moving to counter you. Griffin 6, I'm your counter sniper support. I've been in these mountains for 3 days. Staff Sergeant Hayden Wolf, Independent Surveillance Element. As for how I got here, I jumped out of a perfectly good airplane at 22,000 feet and landed on a mountain. Now I'm doing what I was trained to do. There was a long pause. Then the SEAL team leader's voice came back, tinged with dark humor. Well, Sergeant Wolf, I don't know what kind of training produces someone who can make those shots, but I'm damn glad you're on our side. Griffin 6 out. Hayden moved through the fog, already planning her next position. But as she moved, she noticed something that made her slow, then stop completely. On a flat rock near where the second enemy fighter had been positioned, she found a spent brass casing, .338 Lapua Magnum, the same caliber she used. But this casing had markings she recognized, specialized handloads that only a few people in the world would know how to manufacture. She picked up the brass and examined it closely. The fog swirled around her, turning the world into shades of gray. And for the first time since landing in these mountains, Hayden Wolf felt something cold settle into her gut. This wasn't from either of the fighters she just killed. Their weapons were visible in her photos, standard Taliban rifles. This brass was from someone else, someone who'd been here, probably watching the same engagement she just concluded. Someone who used the same specialized ammunition she did. The Reaper. He'd been here, maybe was still here, somewhere in this fog, watching her even as she'd been watching the enemy fighters below. He was sending a message. I know you're here. I'm watching you. I see what you can do. Come find me. Hayden pocketed the brass and continued moving, but now her movements were different, more cautious, more alert. Her eyes scanned not just for threats ahead, but for any sign of observation from the surrounding terrain, any glint of optics, any unnatural shape among the rocks. Because she wasn't just hunting anymore, she was being hunted. And somewhere in these mountains was a man who'd killed Lucas Kane, a man who was as skilled as she was, a man who knew she was here and was waiting for her to make a mistake. Hayden reached her new hide site and settled in, but this time she positioned herself with exits in mind. Escape routes. Multiple positions she could shift between if she needed to evade. The fog continued to roll through the mountains, thick and concealing. Perfect cover for a ghost, or a Reaper. The extraction helicopter arrived at dawn on day 5, pulling Hayden out of the mountains after 72 hours of continuous surveillance. She climbed aboard with her gear, face streaked with camouflage paint and dirt, eyes red from lack of sleep, but still sharp and alert. The crew chief offered her water and a ration pack. She took both without speaking, settling into the web seat as the bird lifted off and banked toward the forward operating base. Through the open door, she watched the mountains fall away beneath her. Somewhere down there was the Reaper. Somewhere in that maze of rocks and valleys was the man who'd killed Lucas Kane. The man who'd been close enough to leave that brass casing for her to find. He was sending a message. I know you're here. I'm watching you. Come find me. Hayden intended to do exactly that. The forward operating base was a sprawling collection of prefabricated buildings, concrete barriers, and razor wire carved into a valley floor that had probably been peaceful farmland before the war came. Guard towers at each corner. Heavily armed sentries at every checkpoint. The constant background noise of generators and vehicles and helicopters coming and going. Colonel Margaret Vaughn was waiting when Hayden's helicopter touched down, 52 years old, gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, eyes that had seen 3 decades of military operations and missed exactly nothing. She'd made her career in an era when women weren't supposed to be in combat roles, much less commanding special operations task forces. The fact that she was here, in charge, said everything about her capabilities. Hayden climbed out of the helicopter and immediately came to attention. Vaughn waved off the formality. Walk with me, Sergeant. They moved away from the flight line, heading toward the operations center. Vaughn waited until they were out of earshot of anyone else before speaking. 11 confirmed kills during that SEAL team engagement. Every single shot prevented a threat to our forces. The team leader, Lieutenant Cole Jameson, has already submitted a commendation for your actions. He said, and I quote, "Those were the most impressive shots he's witnessed in 12 years of service." Hayden said nothing. She'd learned long ago that the best response to praise was usually silence. Vaughn continued, "We've confirmed that one of the enemy fighters you engaged was on our target list. Mid-level Taliban commander. Worth more alive for interrogation, but definitely worth dead if capture wasn't feasible. Which it wasn't, given the circumstances. Good work." They reached the operations center, a fortified building with blast walls and armed guards. Vaughn held the door open, gestured for Hayden to enter first. Inside, the air was 20 degrees cooler, recycled and filtered. Banks of computers and communications equipment lined the walls. Intelligence analysts hunched over screens, tracking enemy movements across the entire province. Vaughn led her to a small briefing room and closed the door. The sudden silence was jarring after the constant noise of the base. "Sit down, Hayden." The use of her first name made Hayden's internal alarms go off. Vaughn was always professional, always formal. First names meant something personal was coming, something that went beyond standard military protocol. She sat. Vaughn remained standing, arms crossed, studying her with those sharp eyes. "I know about Lucas Kane. I know he was more than just your spotter. I know he was the closest thing to family you had after Colonel Briggs died. And I know that finding that brass casing has made this mission personal for you in ways that concern me." Hayden kept her face neutral. "Ma'am, I'm conducting my assigned mission within authorized parameters. My personal feelings don't affect my professional performance." "Bullshit." Vaughn's voice was flat, matter of fact. "Your personal feelings are exactly what's going to make you take risks you shouldn't take. The Reaper isn't like the targets you've been eliminating. He's as trained as you are. He's been doing this longer than you've been alive. He's specifically hunting American snipers, which means he's hunting you. And he knows you're hunting him, which makes this a duel instead of an assassination." Hayden met Vaughn's gaze directly. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am." "Granted. I've spent 18 months getting better, training harder, pushing my effective range." Her voice cracked. Just for a second, just enough for Vaughn to notice. Hayden took a breath, forced herself to continue. "Lucas was 26 years old. He talked about his kid sister graduating high school, about teaching her to shoot, about getting out and going to college, and I was supposed to protect him. That's what the shooter does. You protect your spotter." She looked down at her hands. They were shaking slightly. I didn't even see where the shot came from. 1 second he was there, calling Win for me, joking about whether his sister would like the girl I was dating. The next second, he was gone. Just gone. And I couldn't do anything. Couldn't return fire. Couldn't save him. Couldn't even identify the shooter. When she looked up, her eyes were dry but fierce. So yes, ma'am, this is personal. But personal doesn't mean reckless. It means I will never let another soldier die because I wasn't good enough. It means I can make shots now that I couldn't have dreamed of making when Lucas died. And it means when I face the Reaper, one of us isn't walking away, and it won't be me. Vaughn was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved to the briefing table and spread out several satellite photographs. Intelligence has identified a Taliban commander meeting scheduled for 72 hours from now. Multiple high-value targets will be present at this compound. She tapped one of the photos. Lieutenant Jameson's SEAL team will conduct a direct action raid. Your job is to provide advanced surveillance and precision fire support if needed. Hayden studied the photographs. The compound was in a valley, surrounded by elevated terrain. Good defensive position for the enemy, which meant difficult approach for the SEAL team. Rules of engagement? She asked. Standard. Positive identification required before engagement. Priority targets are marked in your briefing pack. And Hayden? Vaughn's voice went hard. If the Reaper appears, you do not engage alone. You report his position and you evade. That's an order, not a suggestion. An order. Acknowledge. Hayden wanted to argue, wanted to say that if she got the Reaper in her crosshairs, no force on earth was going to stop her from taking the shot. But Vaughn was her commanding officer, and orders were orders. Acknowledged, ma'am. Vaughn looked at her for a long moment, clearly not entirely convinced, but she nodded. Good. You insert in 18 hours. Get some rest. Eat something. Clean your weapon. And Hayden, stay alive. We've lost too many good soldiers already. The briefing room at the SEAL compound was Spartan and functional. Maps on the walls. Satellite imagery spread across a central table. 12 men in desert camouflage utilities, standing or sitting, waiting for their team leader to begin the pre-mission brief. Hayden stood in the back corner, staying out of the way, observing. She'd been invited to attend, which was unusual. Normally, her missions were completely compartmented. The supported units didn't even know she existed until she appeared to save their lives. But after the mountain engagement, Lieutenant Cole Jameson had requested she attend the planning session for the upcoming raid. He wanted his team to know who was providing overwatch, wanted them to understand the capabilities she brought to the operation. Jameson was 35, medium height, compact build, the kind of weathered look that came from a dozen years of hard deployments. His voice when he spoke was calm, authoritative, the voice of a man who'd led teams through situations where one wrong decision meant people died. Gentlemen, we have a time-sensitive target. Taliban commander meeting at this compound in 72 hours. Our mission is to conduct a direct action raid, neutralize the targets, and extract before enemy reinforcements arrive. He gestured to the satellite imagery. The problem is approach. The compound sits in a valley with elevated terrain on all sides. Standard Taliban defensive posture. They'll have observation posts, probably armed sentries, definitely communications to call for help if they see us coming. One of the SEALs spoke up. What about air support? Can we get a gunship to soften the target before we go in? Jameson shook his head. Negative. Intelligence indicates possible civilian presence in adjacent structures. No authorization for airstrikes. This has to be a precision operation. Which brings me to our ace in the hole. He turned toward Hayden. Every eye in the room followed. Most of you saw what happened on that ridgeline 3 days ago. Someone eliminated 2 enemy fighters from over 2,000 meters, shots that frankly seemed impossible. That someone is standing in this room right now. Staff Sergeant Hayden Wolf, call sign Ghost 1. She'll be providing advanced surveillance and precision fire support for this operation. The SEALs studied her with open curiosity. She could see the questions in their faces. How does someone that size carry a rifle that weighs 40 pounds plus gear? How does a woman make shots that most male snipers can't make? Is she really as good as the team leader says? Or did we just get lucky on that mountain? Hayden was used to the scrutiny, used to the doubt. She let them look. Didn't say anything, just stood there calm and professional, letting her reputation speak for itself. Jameson continued. Sergeant Wolf will insert 12 hours before our assault. She'll establish an elevated observation position and provide real-time intelligence on enemy movements. If we encounter resistance at range beyond our capabilities, she'll eliminate the threat. Questions? A hand went up. Chief Petty Officer Garrett Sullivan, the team's second-in-command. 32 years old, red hair going gray at the temples, the kind of steady presence that every good team needed. Ma'am, no disrespect intended, but what's your maximum effective range? If we run into problems, I need to know what you can and can't handle. Hayden spoke for the first time since entering the room. Her voice was quiet but carried clearly in the enclosed space. My longest confirmed kill is 2,450 meters. I'm certified for extreme long-range interdiction out to 2,500 meters. The compound you're hitting tomorrow will be at approximately 1,400 meters from my position. That's well within my capability. If you encounter threats at that range, I can eliminate them. Sullivan nodded slowly. That's good enough for me. Another SEAL spoke up, younger, maybe mid-20s. They're calling you the Ghost. That because you appear out of nowhere? That's part of it, Hayden said. Also because most of the people I shoot never know I'm there until the round impacts. I operate alone, from positions most people can't reach, at ranges most people consider impossible. By the time the enemy realizes they're being engaged, it's too late to do anything about it. The young SEAL grinned. I like that. Ghost works. Jameson brought the briefing back on track. All right, settle down. Let's go over the assault plan. We'll approach from the south under cover of darkness. Breach point is here. He tapped the satellite image. Sergeant Wolf, what can you tell us about the defensive positions? Hayden moved to the table, studying the imagery. There's a guard tower at the northeast corner. At least one sentry, possibly two. Machine gun position on the main building's roof. And what looks like a fighting position on the western wall with multiple personnel. Those are your primary threats. Can you engage them before we assault? Affirmative. If you need those positions eliminated, I can do it. But once I start shooting, the compound will know they're under attack. The element of surprise will be gone. Jameson nodded. Understood. So we time it precisely. You eliminate the three key positions rapidly, then we assault during the confusion before they can organize a response. How fast can you engage all three? Hayden calculated mentally. 2 minutes to pre-range all three positions and develop firing solutions. Then I can engage all three in under 60 seconds if you need speed. Sullivan whistled low. 60 seconds, 3 targets, 1,400 meters. That's impressive, ma'am. It's what I do, Chief. The briefing continued for another hour. Details of approach routes, contingency plans, communication protocols, extraction procedures. Hayden absorbed all of it, fitting the SEAL team's assault plan into her own operational framework. Understanding how the pieces would move across the battlefield allowed her to anticipate where her fire support would be most effective. When the briefing concluded, the SEALs filed out. Jameson hung back, gesturing for Hayden to remain. I wanted to thank you, he said once they were alone, for what you did on that mountain. My men were pinned down, taking accurate fire, no way to respond. If you hadn't been there, I'd be writing letters to families right now, explaining how their sons or husbands died because we walked into an ambush. Hayden shook her head. Don't thank me for doing my job, Lieutenant. You'd do the same if positions were reversed. Maybe, but most people can't do what you do. Those shots were beyond anything I've seen in my career. Makes me wonder who trained you. Colonel Samuel Briggs. He was a legend before most modern snipers were born. He taught me that shooting isn't about natural talent. It's about obsessive preparation. He'd say, perfect the routine and the shot takes care of itself. Everything I do follows his methods. Sounds like a good teacher. He was the best. Hayden's voice went quieter. He died 3 years ago. Heart attack. Never got to see me make the shots he trained me for. But I carry his scope. Figure if there's anything after death, maybe he's watching. Maybe he knows. Jameson was quiet for a moment. My first team leader was killed in Iraq. IED. I was 23, thought I knew everything. He taught me I knew nothing, and that admission of ignorance was the first step to actually learning. I think about him before every mission. Wonder what he'd say about the decisions I'm making. So yeah, I understand carrying someone with you. They stood there in companionable silence. Two professionals who'd both lost people they cared about, both still doing the job despite the cost. Finally, Jameson spoke again. This Reaper character, the one who killed your spotter, Intel says he's in this area. You planning to go after him? If I get the opportunity, and if that opportunity comes during our operation, what then? Hayden met his gaze directly. Then I make the same choice any sniper makes. Assess the tactical situation. Which target presents the greatest threat. Engage accordingly. If the Reaper is threatening your team, he becomes the priority. If he's not, then I stick to the mission parameters. That's not what I asked. I know what you asked, Lieutenant, and the answer is, I'm a professional. I don't let personal feelings override tactical necessity, but I won't pretend I don't want him dead. Lucas Kane was my partner. He was my friend. He died because the Reaper is better than I was 18 months ago. I'm better now. If we meet, one of us isn't walking away, and I intend to make sure it's him. Jameson studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Fair enough, just make sure you come back. My team's starting to like having you around. The insertion, 12 hours later, was quieter than Hayden's initial jump. A helicopter dropped her at a pre-positioned landing zone 4 kilometers from the target compound. She moved through the darkness with practiced ease, climbing toward the elevated position she'd identified from satellite imagery. By the time the sun rose, she was established in a hide site at 9,200 feet, with clear observation of the valley below. The compound was clearly visible through her scope at 1,400 meters. She could see guards moving along the walls, see smoke rising from cooking fires, see vehicles parked in the courtyard. She ranged multiple points. Guard tower at 1,437 meters. Machine gun position at 1,485 meters. Western fighting position at 1,392 meters. She calculated firing solutions for all three, accounting for the range differences in varying wind conditions at each position. Then she settled in to wait. The hours passed slowly. The sun climbed higher. The compound below came fully awake. Hayden counted personnel, noted movement patterns, transmitted compressed data bursts back to the operations center. Standard surveillance work, the kind of patient observation that separated professional snipers from amateurs who just wanted to shoot things. At 1,400 hours, her radio crackled. Jameson's voice, calm and controlled. Ghost 1, Griffin 6, we're in position, ready to initiate on your signal. Hayden scanned the compound one final time. Everything matched her earlier observations. 3 key defensive positions that would shred the SEAL team if left operational. Her finger moved to the radio transmit button. Griffin 6, Ghost 1, stand by for fire mission. 3 targets, estimate 50 seconds from first shot to third shot. Griffin 6 copies, execute when ready. Hayden settled into perfect shooting position. She'd already made all her calculations, already ranged all 3 targets, already developed the firing sequence in her mind. Guard tower first to eliminate observation. Machine gun second to remove the heavy weapon. Fighting position third because those fighters would take longest to react and bring effective fire on the assaulting SEALs. She placed her crosshairs on the guard tower sentry with the proper holdover for 1,437 meters, found her natural respiratory pause, applied smooth, rearward pressure to the trigger. The rifle fired. Through the scope, she watched the sentry drop. She worked the bolt smoothly, ejecting the spent casing and chambering a fresh round, swung the rifle to the machine gun position. The gunner was starting to react to the sound of the first shot, turning to look toward the guard tower. Hayden fired again. The machine gunner collapsed across his weapon. She worked the bolt, shifted to the western fighting position. 3 enemy fighters were visible, all of them now alert but confused, trying to figure out where the shots were coming from. Hayden selected the most exposed target. Third shot, the fighter went down. 47 seconds, faster than promised. All 3 positions engaged, Hayden transmitted. Tower clear, machine gun neutralized, western position disrupted. Griffin 6, you are clear to move. Through her scope, she watched the SEAL team emerge from concealment and sprint toward the compound. Professional, fast, using the confusion created by her precision fire to close the distance before the enemy could organize a response. An enemy fighter appeared on the main building's roof, rifle raised, clearly trying to acquire targets. Hayden ranged him at 1,450 meters, calculated, and fired. He dropped before he could get a shot off. Another fighter emerged from a building, running toward the now unmanned machine gun. Hayden engaged, 1,470 meters. Target down. She was in a rhythm now, scanning for threats, engaging anything that posed danger to the assaulting team. Her movements were smooth, economical, the product of thousands of hours of training. Chamber around, find the target, calculate the hold, fire, observe impact, repeat. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Through her scope, she saw an enemy fighter appear on a rooftop 200 meters from the SEAL position. He was carrying what looked like an RPG launcher, positioning himself to fire at the Americans. Range to target, 1,630 meters from Hayden's position. She ranged, calculated, and fired in under 5 seconds. The enemy fighter with the RPG collapsed before he could launch. Griffin 6, Ghost 1, I just eliminated an RPG gunner on the northern building rooftop. You had a rocket about to come your way. Jameson's voice came back, slightly breathless from exertion. Ghost 1, Griffin 6, good shooting. We're continuing clearance. For the next 15 minutes, Hayden provided precision overwatch while the SEAL team cleared the compound room by room. She eliminated 7 enemy fighters who threatened the team, all at ranges between 1,400 and 1,700 meters. Each shot was clean. Each shot prevented a threat before it could materialize into actual danger. Finally, Jameson's voice crackled over the radio. Ghost 1, Griffin 6, compound secure, primary target confirmed KIA. We're conducting site exploitation and then we'll be ready for extract. Ghost 1 copies. I'll maintain overwatch until you're clear. 20 minutes later, the SEAL team withdrew from the compound, carrying captured intelligence materials and documentation. Hayden watched them move through her scope, counted all 12 men, confirmed no one was injured. She began breaking down her position, preparing to displace. Standard procedure. Never stay in one place after engaging. Move immediately. That's when she saw the glint. Just a tiny flash of reflected sunlight from a ridgeline approximately 2,200 meters to the east. Could have been anything. A piece of metal, a shard of glass, a puddle of water, or a rifle scope. Hayden froze, brought her own scope to bear on that distant ridgeline, scanned methodically, looking for anything out of place. There, a shape among the rocks that didn't quite fit the terrain, too regular, too deliberate. The kind of concealment a professional would construct. Someone was watching, had been watching this entire engagement, observing her, learning her patterns, studying her technique. Hayden's radio crackled. Not the normal encrypted tactical frequency. This was an enemy frequency, one she monitored but rarely heard traffic on. The voice that came through was male, accented, speaking English with the kind of precision that came from formal training rather than native fluency. Very impressive, Ghost. 11 kills, all at significant range, all clean shots. Colonel Briggs trained you well. Hayden felt ice form in her stomach. The Reaper knew Briggs, knew her training, knew her call sign. She keyed her own radio, speaking calmly despite the adrenaline spike. Reaper, show yourself. Not today. Today I watch. I learn. I see how good you've become. Lucas Kane's death taught you caution, made you better. Good. When we finally meet, I want you at your best. It's only proper that Briggs's final student receives a worthy end. The radio went silent. Hayden kept her scope on that distant position, but the figure was gone. Disappeared as completely as if it had never been there. She scanned for another 5 minutes, but saw nothing. The Reaper had withdrawn, melted back into the mountains like smoke dispersing in wind. Hayden displaced from her position, moving quickly toward the extraction point where a helicopter would pull her out. But as she moved, she felt the weight of being watched, felt the presence of another professional sniper somewhere in these mountains, studying her, planning his next move. The hunt had truly begun. And for the first time since Lucas Kane's death, Hayden Wolf wasn't entirely certain she was the hunter rather than the hunted. 3 days later, intelligence intercepted Taliban communications that made Hayden's blood run cold. Colonel Vaughn called her into the operations center, played the audio. A Taliban commander's voice, speaking Pashto with English translation scrolling across the screen. The American ghost woman, $5,000 for information leading to her capture. 10,000 for her death. She has killed 12 of our fighters. She appears from nowhere, disappears like Jinn. Find her, kill her. Vaughn stopped the playback. You're officially famous. They're calling you the Ghost Woman. They've put a bounty on you, and they're terrified. Hayden stared at the screen. That makes targeting more dangerous. Every Taliban fighter in the province will be looking for me. Yes, which is why I'm giving you the option to stand down. We can pull you out, reassign you stateside until things cool off. Hayden thought of Lucas, of the Reaper still out there, of the SEAL teams who'd come to rely on her overwatch. Negative, ma'am. If they're hunting me, that means I'm doing my job right. Let them look. Ghosts don't get caught. Vaughn smiled grimly. I thought you'd say that. Be careful out there, Hayden. You're too valuable to lose. Over the next 2 weeks, Hayden supported 3 more SEAL operations. Each time she inserted alone, established elevated positions that other personnel couldn't or wouldn't access, and provided precision fire that eliminated threats before they could engage friendly forces. Operation 2, River Valley Interdiction. Taliban convoy at 1,650 meters. 5 precision kills in 12 minutes. The convoy never knew what hit them. Operation 3, Mountain Compound Raid. Hayden eliminated sentries at ranges from 1,400 to 1,800 meters, allowing the SEAL team to breach undetected. 0 American casualties. 17 enemy fighters killed. Operation 4, Village Defense. Taliban fighters attempting to overrun an Afghan police checkpoint. Hayden, from a position at 9,400 feet, systematically eliminated threats at ranges from 1,200 to 1,900 meters, saved the lives of 8 Afghan policemen and 4 American advisors. Her reputation grew despite her preference for anonymity. SEALs who'd worked with her spread the word. There was a lone sniper operating in the mountains, a woman who could make impossible shots and who moved through terrain like a ghost. Some started using her call sign with reverence, Ghost One, the phantom who appeared when needed and disappeared before anyone could thank her properly. The nickname amused her. It fit the way she operated, invisible until the moment she was needed, then devastating in her efficiency, then gone before anyone could fully comprehend what had happened. But the Reaper was still out there, still watching, still waiting. Hayden could feel him. Every time she established a hide, she found herself checking her flanks more carefully. Every time she took a shot, she wondered if he was observing, learning, preparing for their inevitable confrontation. The brass casing she'd found stayed in her pocket, a constant reminder that she wasn't alone in these mountains, that somewhere out there was a predator as skilled as she was, maybe more skilled, and he was coming for her. The question was whether she'd be ready when he finally made his move. The operations center was dim and quiet when Hayden entered at 0300 hours, summoned by an urgent message from Colonel Vaughn. Sleep had been impossible anyway. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the Reaper's voice on that radio. Calm, professional, knowing things he shouldn't know about Briggs, about her training, about Lucas. Vaughn was standing over a map table, studying satellite imagery under the harsh fluorescent lights. She looked up when Hayden approached, and the expression on her face was grim. "We have a problem." Intelligence intercepted communications indicating a major Taliban leadership meeting scheduled for 36 hours from now. Multiple high-value targets. This could be the most significant opportunity we've had in months to decapitate their command structure in this province. Hayden studied the imagery, a compound in a valley surrounded by elevated terrain on all sides. Standard defensive positioning, but something about the setup made her instincts prickle. "What's the problem, ma'am?" Vaughn pointed to the compound. "The problem is location. Any conventional assault would result in significant casualties. The Taliban will have security, observation posts, and quick reaction forces within 10 minutes of any attack. Airstrikes aren't authorized due to confirmed civilian structures within the blast radius, which leaves us with exactly one option." She slid another photograph across the table. Satellite imagery of a mountain ridge overlooking the valley. That ridge provides the only viable firing position, 2,800 meters from the compound. Maybe more depending on exact target location within the compound courtyard. Hayden felt her pulse quicken. 2,800 meters, over 1.7 miles. At the absolute edge of her maximum effective range, maybe beyond it. "Ma'am, I've never made a combat shot that long." "I know, but intelligence also confirms that the Reaper will be at this meeting. Taliban leadership has hired him specifically to provide counter-sniper security. They know we have long-range capabilities. They're bringing in the best defensive sniper they can find." The pieces clicked together in Hayden's mind. This is a trap. They're using their own leadership as bait to draw out American snipers. The Reaper will be positioned somewhere with overwatch of likely shooting positions. Anyone who tries to take this shot will be exposed. Exactly. Which is why I'm giving you the choice. You can decline this mission. No one would blame you. The tactical situation is marginal at best, and the risk assessment is off the charts. Or you can attempt what might be an impossible shot while knowing that the man who killed your partner will be hunting you. Hayden looked at the imagery for a long moment. 2,800 meters. Wind conditions at that distance would be impossible to measure accurately. Bullet flight time would be over 4 seconds. 1,000 variables could affect the shot. Temperature gradients, humidity changes, the Coriolis effect from the Earth's rotation. It was the kind of shot that existed more in theory than in practice. But if she made it, she'd eliminate multiple high-value targets in a single operation. And she'd have the opportunity to face the Reaper on terms she chose, rather than waiting for him to ambush her in the mountains. More than that, she'd finally get the chance to end the hunt, to face Lucas's killer, to pay the debt she'd been carrying for 18 months. "I'll take the mission, ma'am, but not alone." Vaughn raised an eyebrow. "Elaborate." "I need a spotter, someone who can help with calculations, watch my flanks, provide security if the Reaper gets close. I've been operating solo for too long. This situation requires a team approach." "You have someone in mind?" "Lieutenant Jameson. He's proven himself tactically sound. His team trusts him, and he's already worked with me successfully. If I'm going to have someone watching my back, I want it to be him." Vaughn considered for a moment, then nodded. "I'll authorize it. But Hayden, this is the most dangerous thing you've ever attempted. If something feels wrong, if the tactical situation deteriorates, you abort and extract. That's an order. We can't afford to lose our best long-range asset on a low-probability shot." "Understood, ma'am." But they both knew that once Hayden was on that mountain, once she had the Reaper in her crosshairs, no force on earth was going to make her abort. Some opportunities only came once. Some debts could only be paid in blood. The briefing with Jameson happened 4 hours later in a secure room with just the two of them. Hayden spread out the satellite imagery and tactical maps, walking him through the mission parameters with the same methodical precision she brought to every shot. Primary target is Taliban leadership meeting. Secondary target, if opportunity presents, is the Reaper. But here's the problem. She pointed to the ridgeline position. That's our only viable shooting location, 2,800 meters from the compound, maybe more. The Reaper knows American tactics. He'll have identified the same position. He'll either be there first, or he'll be watching it from somewhere else. Jameson studied the maps with the eye of someone who'd planned dozens of combat operations. "So we're walking into a potential ambush to take a shot that's at the edge of impossible while being hunted by someone who's as good as you are. That about sum it up?" "Pretty much. And you still want to do this?" Hayden met his gaze directly. "Lucas Kane was 26 years old when he died. He'd been my spotter for 18 months. We'd made over 40 confirmed kills together. He was thinking about getting out, going to college, maybe becoming a teacher. The Reaper put a bullet through his head and erased all of that. So, yeah, I want to do this. I need to do this. But I won't ask you to come along if you think the risk is too high." Jameson was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, a grim expression that didn't reach his eyes. "I've been doing this job for 12 years. I've lost friends. I've written letters to families. I've stood at memorials for good men who died bad deaths. If there's a chance to take out the bastard responsible for some of those deaths, I'm not walking away from it. When do we insert?" 1800 hours. Helicopter drops us 4 clicks from the ridge position. We'll have approximately 6 hours of darkness to reach the position and establish our hide. The meeting is scheduled for noon tomorrow. That gives us time to prep, calculate, and wait for the shot. What do you need from me? Wind calls, backup calculations, security if the Reaper tries to flank us. And if something happens to me, I need you to finish the mission. Take the shot if you can. If you can't, get out and make sure someone knows exactly where the Reaper was positioned. Intel like that could save lives. Jameson nodded slowly. You're planning for your own death. That's not exactly inspiring confidence. I'm planning for contingencies. There's a difference. Hope isn't a strategy. You prepare for the worst possible outcome and then execute the plan that gives you the best chance of success. If I die on that mountain, it won't be because I failed to consider the possibility. The helicopter insertion happened exactly as planned. 1800 hours. The sun just beginning to set over the Afghan mountains. The pilot brought them in low and fast, flaring at the last second to drop them at a pre-positioned landing zone in a narrow valley 4 kilometers from their target position. Hayden and Jameson hit the ground running, weapons ready, moving immediately toward cover. The helicopter was already pulling away, rotors beating the air as it gained altitude and disappeared to the south. Within 30 seconds, they were alone in the growing darkness, with nothing but the wind and the distant sound of a shepherd's dog barking somewhere in the valleys below. They moved through the night with tactical patience. 4 kilometers doesn't sound like much, but in mountainous terrain with full combat loads, it might as well be 40. They climbed steadily, always alert, always watching for signs of enemy presence or observation. Jameson stayed close, matching Hayden's pace, never complaining about the altitude or the weight of his gear. He'd done this kind of movement before, spent long hours humping through bad terrain toward objectives that existed only as coordinates on a map. The difference was that usually he had his full team with him. Tonight it was just him and a woman half his size who moved through the darkness like she'd been born in these mountains. They reached the ridge position at 0200 hours. Hayden had selected it carefully from satellite imagery. A cluster of large boulders at 9,600 feet elevation, providing both cover and concealment while offering clear line of sight to the valley below. She immediately began establishing their hide, using techniques Briggs had taught her years ago. Natural materials arranged to break up their outline, careful positioning to avoid silhouetting against the skyline, entry and exit routes planned in advance. Every detail considered because details were what separated living snipers from dead ones. Jameson pulled security while she worked, his rifle covering their approaches, alert for any sign that the Reaper had found them first. When the hide was complete, Hayden began the real work. She pulled out her laser rangefinder and started measuring distances to various points in the compound below. 2,784 meters, 2,791 meters, 2,806 meters. The exact distance would depend on where the target appeared within the compound courtyard. She spent the next 2 hours gathering environmental data with obsessive attention to detail. Wind speed and direction at multiple elevations. Temperature at her position versus estimated temperature in the valley. Humidity readings. Barometric pressure. Every variable that could affect a bullet in flight over nearly 2 miles of air. Jameson watched her work with growing respect. This wasn't just shooting. This was applied physics, mathematics, meteorology, the kind of expertise that took years to develop and couldn't be faked. "How many times have you made a shot this long?" he asked quietly. "In training? Maybe a dozen times. Combat? Never. My longest confirmed kill is 2,450 meters. This is 600 meters beyond that. Different category entirely." "What makes you think you can do it?" Hayden was silent for a moment, checking her ballistic calculator, verifying calculations. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "Briggs used to say that every impossible shot is just a series of small, manageable problems. You can't solve the whole problem at once. It's too big, too many variables. But you can measure the distance. You can measure the wind. You can account for temperature and elevation and bullet drop. You break the impossible into pieces and solve each piece individually. Do that enough times, execute each step correctly, and the impossible becomes merely difficult. And if you can't solve all the pieces, then I miss. The target survives, and the Reaper probably kills me while I'm trying to chamber a second round. But I've been training for this shot my entire career. Everything Briggs taught me, everything I learned from Lucas, every hour spent on the range perfecting my technique, it all comes down to tomorrow at noon. Either I'm good enough or I'm not. We'll find out together. Dawn came slowly to the mountains, the darkness gradually giving way to gray light that revealed the valley below in stages. Hayden glassed the compound through her scope, noting details that hadn't been visible in satellite imagery. Guard positions, vehicle placements, the way foot traffic moved between buildings, and searching for any sign of the Reaper. If he was smart, and everything suggested he was, he'd be positioned somewhere with overwatch of this exact ridge. Somewhere he could observe anyone attempting the shot Hayden was planning. The question was, where? She scanned the surrounding terrain methodically. Hundreds of potential positions. Thousands of rocks and crevices where a skilled sniper could hide. Finding him before he revealed himself would require luck more than skill. At 0900 hours, Jameson handed her a ration bar and a water bottle. "You need to eat something. Can't make impossible shots on an empty stomach." Hayden ate mechanically, not tasting the food, her mind already working through the shot sequence. The ballistic solution was complex. 78.4 minutes of angle elevation adjustment, 13.2 minutes of angle windage correction. But those were baseline calculations. The actual shot would require real-time adjustments based on wind conditions at the moment of firing. At this distance, her bullet would be in flight for approximately 4.3 seconds. During that time, even a moderate wind shift could push the round several feet off target. She'd need to read the wind perfectly, make the corrections instinctively, and trust her training. "Tell me about Briggs," Jameson said quietly. "You talk about him like he was more than just an instructor." Hayden lowered her scope, considering the question. "He was the first person who ever saw potential in me instead of just a problem to be managed. I grew up in foster care, military families who took in kids for the extra money, never stayed anywhere longer than a year, never had anyone who gave a damn whether I succeeded or failed." She adjusted her scope's focus, tracking a bird flying across the valley far below. "Then I joined the Army, went to sniper school because it seemed like the one place where being alone was an advantage instead of a liability. Briggs was teaching an advanced course. He watched me shoot for maybe 15 minutes and then said I had a gift. Said if I was willing to work, really work, he could teach me to do things most snipers only dreamed about." Sounds like he was right. He was a hard teacher. Made me do the same drills hundreds of times until they were perfect. Made me calculate ballistics manually before I could use a computer. Made me spend weeks in the field learning to survive on nothing. But everything he taught me was designed to keep me alive and make me better. He saw something in me worth developing. That meant everything. He'd be proud of what you've become. Hayden was quiet for a long moment. "I hope so. I carry his scope. Figure if there's anything after death, maybe he knows. Maybe he's watching. Maybe when I make this shot, he'll be the first one to see it." The morning dragged on. Hayden and Jameson took turns on the scope, one watching the compound while the other rested or conducted security sweeps of their surroundings. The sun climbed higher. The temperature rose. The winds shifted and changed, requiring constant recalculation of the ballistic solution. At 1100 hours, vehicles began arriving at the compound. Expensive SUVs, the kind Taliban commanders preferred. Men emerged, armed guards taking up positions, while the leadership moved into the main building. Hayden ranged each new arrival. 2,795 meters, 2,802 meters, 2,818 meters. The compound courtyard covered enough area that a 50-meter range variance was possible, depending on exact target location. At 11:55 hours, Jameson spoke quietly. "Multiple individuals appearing in the courtyard. I count 8 so far." Hayden was already behind her rifle, settled into perfect shooting position. Through her scope at maximum magnification, the compound courtyard was a distant rectangle. Tiny figures moving around, barely recognizable as human at over 1.7 miles. She scanned methodically, comparing faces to intelligence photographs she'd memorized. Most of the men were guards or lower-level fighters. Not worth the risk of this shot. But then she saw him. Taliban commander. Intelligence had provided detailed photographs. Even at this impossible distance, even through the heat shimmer and atmospheric distortion, she recognized him. The primary target. The man responsible for coordinating attacks across the entire province. "I have identification," she said quietly. "Primary target confirmed. Center of the courtyard, 2,795 meters." Jameson was on his spotting scope, tracking the same target. "Confirmed. I have him. Wind is 12 miles per hour from the northwest. Temperature 58 degrees. Do you have your firing solution?" Hayden had already made the calculations, already adjusted her scope with hands that were steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. At this distance, her aim point was actually several feet above and to the right of the target, compensating for bullet drop and wind drift that would occur during the 4.3 seconds of flight time. She found her natural respiratory pause, that moment of perfect stillness between breaths when the body was completely motionless. Her finger took up the slack in the trigger. The crosshairs settled on target with the massive holdover required for this distance. And then Jameson's voice, sharp and urgent. "Movement! East Ridge, 2,680 meters. I have a rifle signature. Hayden's heart rate spiked. The Reaper had to be. Contained on the opposite side of the valley with his own rifle, his own scope, watching this exact engagement. Is he targeting us? She asked, not moving from her shooting position. Jameson adjusted his spotting scope. Negative. He's aiming toward the compound. Same target. He's setting up for his own shot. The tactical situation crystallized in Hayden's mind with perfect clarity. The Reaper hadn't been hired to protect the Taliban leadership. He'd been hired to eliminate them. This entire meeting was a setup. The Taliban commanders thought they were secure. They had no idea they were walking into their own execution. But the Reaper also hadn't expected another sniper to be here, which meant he didn't know about Hayden yet, which meant she had maybe 30 seconds before he spotted her position, and everything turned into a duel instead of a long-range assassination. Hayden, what's the call? Jameson's voice was tense. Do we take the primary target or engage the Reaper? The decision should have been easy. Mission first. Always mission first. The Taliban commander was the assigned target. That's what they'd come here to do. But the Reaper had killed Lucas, had killed dozens of other American soldiers, was about to eliminate the Taliban leadership and then disappear again, continuing his killing for whoever paid him next. If she let him take this shot and slip away, she might never get another chance. And more than that, she owed Lucas, owed him justice, owed him the knowledge that his killer wouldn't walk away from this mountain. I'm taking the Reaper, Hayden said. The words came out calm, decisive, no hesitation. 2,680 meters, a just wind call for that range. Hayden, the mission is stopping the biggest threat. That's him. Give me the wind call. Jameson hesitated for maybe 2 seconds. Then his training took over, and he was all business. Professional spotter providing the data his shooter needed. Wind 10 miles per hour, quartering from the northwest. Temperature holding steady. Range 2,680 meters. Elevation angle -4 degrees. Hayden swung her rifle to the east ridge, acquired the Reaper's position. Through her scope, she could see him, a figure in camouflage positioned among the rocks, completely focused on his own target. He had no idea death was watching him from across the valley. She made rapid calculations. 2,680 meters. Bullet flight time approximately 4.1 seconds. The shot was slightly downhill, requiring compensation for angle. Wind was quartering, not direct, adding complexity to the holdover. She adjusted her scope, settled into the shot, found her respiratory pause. The world narrowed down to the crosshairs and the target. Nothing else existed. Not the mountain, not the valley, not even Jameson breathing quietly beside her. Just the physics of the shot and the question of whether she was good enough to make it. For Lucas, for Briggs, for every soldier the Reaper had killed. Hayden fired. The recoil was substantial, but she rode it perfectly, staying in the scope to observe impact. 4.1 seconds of bullet flight. She watched through the scope, tracking where the round had gone. At 2,680 meters, she saw the Reaper react, saw him flinch, saw him drop his rifle. But he didn't collapse, didn't fall. The shot had hit him, but not fatally. Maybe grazed his shoulder, maybe hit his gear, but definitely not a kill. Hit but not down, Jameson called. He's moving, abandoning his position. Hayden was already working the bolt, chambering a fresh round. But the Reaper was no longer visible. He dropped below the rocks, using terrain to shield himself from follow-up shots. And now the Taliban commander in the courtyard was reacting to the sound of gunfire, starting to move toward cover. Primary target moving, Jameson said. You've got maybe 5 seconds before he's inside. Hayden swung her rifle back toward the compound, found the Taliban commander through her scope. He was running now, a moving target at 2,795 meters. The shot had just gone from incredibly difficult to nearly impossible. She led the target, calculating not just for wind and distance, but now for lateral movement as well. Her aim point was 8 feet ahead of where the man was running, trusting the ballistics and her training, trusting everything Briggs had taught her, everything Lucas had believed she could do. She fired. 4.3 seconds of bullet flight, the longest 4 seconds of Hayden's life. She watched through the scope, tracking the target's movement, calculating in her head whether the lead had been correct. The Taliban commander collapsed mid-stride. "Target down," Jameson breathed. "Holy hell, you actually hit a moving target at 2,795 meters. But Hayden was already chambering a third round, swinging back toward the Reaper's last known position. He'd be evading now, moving through the rocks, trying to escape before she could get another shot. There, a figure moving down the east ridge, maybe 200 meters below where he'd been positioned. Range to target, 2,920 meters. Beyond her longest confirmed kill, beyond anything she'd attempted even in training, beyond what most people thought was possible. "Hayden, that's too far," Jameson said. "Let him go. We got the primary target, mission complete." She could let him go, could watch him disappear into the mountains again, could wait for another opportunity that might never come. Or she could take the shot that Briggs had trained her for, the shot that existed at the absolute edge of human capability, the shot that would either end the Reaper's killing or prove that some distances were simply too great. Lucas deserved this shot, deserved someone willing to push beyond the possible to bring his killer to justice. Hayden ranged the target, 2,920 meters. She pulled out her weather station, made rapid calculations. The wind had shifted slightly, now 15 miles per hour from the west. Temperature holding at 58 degrees. Extreme downhill angle adding complexity. Bullet flight time would be approximately 4.7 seconds. During that flight, 1,000 variables could affect the trajectory. A gust of wind, a temperature change, the rotation of the earth beneath the bullet's path. She made her adjustments, settled into position, found that perfect moment of stillness. This was it. Everything she'd trained for, everything she'd become, all the hours on the range, all the drills, all the calculations, all the nights alone in the mountains learning to read terrain and wind and distance. All of it came down to this moment. "Lucas," she whispered, so quiet even Jameson barely heard it. "This is for you," and fired. 4.7 seconds. Hayden stayed in the scope, watching. The Reaper was still moving, still trying to escape. At this distance, he was barely visible, a tiny figure against the vast landscape of rock and stone. She watched. Time seemed to stretch. The bullet was somewhere in that vast space between her rifle and the target, traveling at over 2,800 feet per second, fighting gravity and wind and the simple physics of distance. She saw him stumble, saw him fall, saw him roll once and then lie still. "Impact," Jameson said quietly. "Target down, 2,920 meters. That's impossible." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Just two soldiers on a mountain, watching a figure lie still almost 2 miles away. Then Hayden's hands started shaking. Not from fear, from release. 18 months of hunting, of training, of carrying Lucas's death like a stone in her chest. And now it was done. "Lucas," she whispered again, so quiet Jameson almost didn't hear it. "It's done. You can rest now." She worked the bolt one more time, chambered another round, kept her rifle trained on the Reaper's position. Professional to the end. But when she blinked, Jameson saw moisture at the corners of her eyes. The hunter had finally caught her prey, and the weight she'd been carrying began, just slightly, to lift. "Griffin Actual, Ghost 1, Hayden transmitted on the tactical frequency. Her voice was steady again, professional. 3 targets engaged. Primary Taliban commander confirmed KIA at 2,795 meters, moving target. Secondary hostile confirmed KIA at 2,680 meters. Tertiary hostile confirmed, KIA, at 2920 meters. Request drone verification on all targets in extraction. Colonel Vaughn's voice came back, stunned. Ghost 1, confirm your last. Did you say 2920 meters? Affirmative. Range verified by laser. 3 shots, 3 targets. Total engagement time approximately 8 minutes. Requesting extraction and verification of secondary and tertiary targets. The next 4 hours were a blur. Helicopter extraction pulled Hayden and Jameson off the mountain. A drone was diverted to the Reaper's last position, confirming a deceased male with sniper equipment and multiple intelligence items indicating he was indeed the wanted enemy combatant known as the Reaper. A follow-up team was inserted to recover the body and intelligence materials. They found photographs on the Reaper's laptop, trophy shots, Lucas Kane's death scene, 8 other American soldiers, men who died to bullets from the rifle lying next to the Reaper's body. Hayden stood in the operations center, watching the drone footage, watching the recovery team work. Her hands were steady now. Her breathing was calm, but inside, something that had been wound tight for 18 months was finally releasing. Jameson stood beside her, equally quiet. Finally, he spoke. I've been doing this job for 12 years. I've seen some incredible shooting, but what you did today, those 3 shots, the moving target, the shot beyond maximum range, that's going to be studied in sniper schools for decades. You just redefined what's possible. Hayden didn't respond immediately. She was watching the screen, watching the recovery team carefully document everything they found. Evidence of the Reaper's kills, proof that this particular threat was finally eliminated. Lucas would have appreciated the technical difficulty, she said finally. He always liked the hard shots, the ones that required perfect execution. He'd have been calling win for me, running backup calculations, making sure I didn't miss any variables. You didn't miss anything. No, I didn't. She turned away from the screen, met Jameson's eyes. Thank you for coming along, for trusting me when the tactical situation went sideways, for being the spotter Lucas would have been if he'd lived. We're a team now. You saved my team on that first mountain. I had your back today. That's how this works. Major General Patricia Stone arrived at the base 2 days later, specifically to meet the sniper who'd made 3 impossible shots and eliminated one of the most wanted enemy combatants in the theater. She was 56 years old, career infantry officer, one of the first women to command troops in combat. She'd seen enough in her career that very little impressed her, but standing in front of Hayden Wolf, looking at the young woman who just set records that might never be broken, Stone found herself genuinely awed. Staff Sergeant Wolf, I've read the after-action reports. I've reviewed the drone footage. I've confirmed the range calculations. You made 3 shots in 8 minutes at ranges from 2680 to 2920 meters. One of those shots was against a moving target. That's beyond anything in the historical record. Hayden stood at attention, professional and composed. Ma'am, I was executing my assigned mission within authorized parameters. You were exceeding every known limit of long-range precision fire. You eliminated a high-value Taliban commander who was responsible for coordinating attacks across this entire province. And you killed the Reaper, an enemy sniper who'd been operating with impunity for over 3 years and who personally killed at least 40 coalition soldiers. Stone stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Hayden could hear. I also know about Lucas Kane. I know this was personal. I know you've been hunting the Reaper since the day your partner died. I'm not going to tell you that revenge is wrong or unprofessional. I'm going to tell you that sometimes the mission and personal justice align perfectly. Today was one of those days. She stepped back, raised her voice to formal volume. You're being promoted to Sergeant First Class, effective immediately. You're also being awarded the Bronze Star with Valor for your actions over the past 30 days. 43 confirmed enemy kills across 8 separate operations. Multiple SEAL team members alive today because of your precision fire support and the elimination of one of the most dangerous enemy combatants in this theater. Thank you, ma'am. Stone studied her for a long moment. You've also been reassigned. There's a specialized training unit that focuses on extreme, long-range operations. They need an instructor who actually knows how to make the shots we've been telling people are possible. Someone who can push the envelope on what we think snipers can accomplish. That someone is you. Ma'am, I'm more effective in the field than in a classroom. You've proven your effectiveness in the field. Now it's time to teach the next generation. Pass on what Colonel Briggs taught you, what you learned from Lucas Kane, what you've proven in combat. Legacy matters, Sergeant. Skills like yours shouldn't die with you. Hayden considered that. Legacy. Briggs had left his legacy through her. Maybe it was time for her to pass it forward. When do I start, ma'am? 2 weeks, after you've had time to decompress and process what you've been through. Use that time well. Talk to someone if you need to. Mourn your friend properly. And prepare yourself for the next phase of your career. The final mission brief with Jameson's SEAL team happened the day before Hayden was scheduled to fly out. All 12 team members assembled in their compound, waiting to say goodbye to the sniper who'd become part of their operational family over the past month. Jameson spoke for all of them. Sergeant Wolf, we wanted to thank you personally before you leave. You appeared out of the fog when we needed you most. You made shots we thought were impossible. You saved lives that would have been lost without your skill. We've worked with a lot of support elements over the years, but we've never seen anyone operate like you do. Chief Garrett Sullivan added, Ma'am, you've set a standard the rest of us are going to spend our careers trying to reach. That 29-20-meter shot, that's legend status. You're going to be teaching classes about yourself in sniper school. Hayden looked at the 12 men who'd been her teammates, who'd trusted her to watch over them from mountains they couldn't reach. Professional warriors who'd accepted her not because of quotas or policies, but because she'd proven herself in the only way that mattered in combat, results. Gentlemen, I appreciate the kind words, but you all know the truth. I had a job. I did it, same as you do yours. Sullivan shook his head. Ma'am, with respect, what you did wasn't a job. It was art, and we're damn grateful for it. Hayden allowed herself a small smile. Then I hope the next sniper who works with you is half as good, because you deserve the best support available. We already had it, Jameson said quietly. We already had it. One of the younger SEALs spoke up. Is it true they're calling you the Ghost now, even outside our team? Hayden's smile widened slightly. I've heard the nickname. It's appropriate. I do prefer to operate from concealment, to appear when needed and disappear when the mission is complete. Like fog rolling in and out of these mountains. Except, unlike fog, I'm precise. They shared a laugh at that. Then the mood turned more serious as the reality set in that this was goodbye. If you ever need anything, Jameson said, you know where to find us. You're part of this team. Always will be. Same goes for you, Lieutenant. If you ever need a ghost watching your six, I'm just a radio call away. 2 weeks later, Hayden stood on the observation deck of a military transport aircraft, watching Afghanistan fall away beneath her. 30 days in those mountains, 43 confirmed kills, 8 successful operations, and 1 personal debt finally settled. She pulled Lucas Kane's dog tags from her pocket, running her thumb over the embossed letters. 26 years old. Forever 26. But the Reaper would never kill another soldier, would never create another Hayden, another person carrying the weight of a partner's death. She placed the tags back over her heart, next to the rifle case containing Briggs' custom scope. 2 legacies, one she carried, one she would build. Below, the mountains of Afghanistan faded into haze. Somewhere down there, new soldiers were learning what Hayden already knew. That war was patient work, precise work, and that the difference between impossible and accomplished was often just one person willing to take the shot no one else would attempt. She thought about Lucas, about his kid sister who was probably graduating college now, about the future he'd never have, the life stolen from him by a bullet from nearly a mile away. "I got him," she whispered to the window, to the empty air, to whatever part of Lucas might still be listening. "He won't hurt anyone else. You can rest now." The aircraft banked west toward home. For the first time in 18 months, Hayden felt something close to peace. The hunt was over. The debt was paid. The ghost who'd haunted her since Lucas's death was finally laid to rest. But more than that, she'd proven something to herself, that the limits people assume for long-range shooting were just limits of imagination. That with the right skills, the right equipment, and the right motivation, shots that seemed impossible were just problems waiting to be solved. Briggs had taught her that. Lucas had believed it, and she'd proven it on a mountain in Afghanistan with 3 shots that would be studied for decades. Now it was time to pass that knowledge forward, to teach the next generation, to ensure that Briggs' methods and Lucas's sacrifice meant something beyond just her own career. The aircraft climbed higher, breaking through clouds into clear sky. Hayden closed her eyes, finally allowing herself to rest. The hunt was over. The ghost could fade, but the legacy would endure.